Tov, everybody. Thank you, Cynthia. Not Chief Executive Officer, Chief Executive Integrator. Integrator. We're trying to build an integrative approach to life here. So doing my best to integrate. I actually had a Hasidic rabbi tell me once the worst thing ever to happen to, I don't know how to say this in English, Yadut, is that, well, he said the worst thing to ever happen is it turned into a religion. This is a Hasidic rabbi, long beard, payas, big furry strimel. And he says religion is completely asur, is prohibited in Torah consciousness. And he says really the model is to be a dancer. True, because religion is dogma. You're not, no joke, religion is dogma, looking straight down and to be a dancer, you have to be attuned to the melody being played for each different situation. So I try to be a dancer myself. I oftentimes introduce myself as a dancer. People have no idea what I'm talking about, but I do, and that's a bit of my integrative dance. I do have a company called Wisdom Tribe, ancient wisdom optimized for the digital age. And we're trying to build a bridge both through digital media as well as experiential education, events, retreats, between ancient Jewish wisdom and the global mindfulness movement, which we'll get into. Just setting the frame, I think Cynthia laid down a really great introduction that we are living in very exciting times. We're in a new epoch of global history. I spent 6 years, did 2 master's degrees in the study of globalization, global history, studying Mandarin Chinese as well, really focusing on East Asia before I had any connection to Israel or to Judaism. I traveled to some 50 countries, spoke Mandarin, and I was really interested and still am very interested in the globe and in global processes. And I think anybody can tell, you really look around in 2015, in 57, 75, 76, I believe, we are entering an exciting new time, which scholars are referring to as the digital age, right? This kind of an outgrowth of post-modernity. We'll maybe get into that in a little bit. But I think a really great way to start this conversation, and it's a conversation I'm having here in Tel Aviv for the first time, but just got back from a month-long trip in America, speaking at everywhere between conferences in Hawaii to, was at Jewish teen events. I was teaching Tai Chi. I'm a Tai Chi teacher, which is a form of mindfulness, to 8th graders, 7th graders, young professionals in Toronto, high schoolers in Columbus, Ohio. I was at the Mindfulness Leadership Summit in DC last week. So it's a conversation that I'm really opening up with a lot of exciting new people, but it's really, really great to be here in Tel Aviv. So as an opener for the conversation, this is going to be the participatory section of the talk. And I'm going to ask a few questions and really want to hear what your guys' opinion are, what you guys have to say about this. So first question, show of hands. Who here, first thing they did when they woke up this morning was pull out their smartphone? And maybe it didn't require pulling out because it was by the bedside. And the last thing you did before bed, I will put my hands up as well. Okay, we are attached. Yes, we are. So I have a friend of mine who goes around giving best practices for life in the digital age.
Some of us don't have smartphones.
Some of us don't have smartphones.
Yeah, life, you are amazing.
Some of us don't have smartphones.
So my friend gave a great piece of advice to people who do have smartphones, which is a new piece of disruptive technology called the alarm clock, right? Anybody heard of that, right? The alarm clock is a very practical way to wake up in the morning and not be dragged into a series of feeds where we're getting liked, we're checking out the Snapchat stories. Maybe this is not the Snapchat generation, but it's a hot topic in America. So get a smartphone. First thing I did to wake up in the morning is look at my smartphone. We had about half the people. Okay. Who here experiences phantom vibrations on a regular basis? What is a phantom vibration? You think your phone is ringing. It's vibrating. It's not. Show of hands. The phantom ring vibration, okay. Now, interesting research coming out looking at what technology, the impact technology is having on our neuropsychological structures. And it turns out the same neuroreceptor that's released, I don't know, when somebody's smoking a cigarette, shooting up heroin, dopamine, people have heard of the neuroreceptor dopamine. It floods the synaptic cleft with this neurotransmitter. And when it's released, it causes a desire, a yearning, an addiction. So people, we're more used to in the drug and alcohol field that people are getting itches or getting cravings for their fix. But for anyone experiencing a phantom vibration, it's along that same wavelength. It's touching on your dopamine feedback loop. So phantom vibrations are a thing. Here's another interesting one that I didn't even know until I started speaking to college students and high school kids. How many people in the room will admit in public to checking their phone just to avoid an awkward social situation? People do that, yeah? Right? Maybe to pretend to shoot a text. It's an obvious thing, yeah? Right? My brother works for the Phoenix Suns. He says there's a receptionist that he just does not want to speak to, and every day he comes into the office, oh, wow, I have to shoot a text out right now, right? That's it, boom, no conversation. It's interesting, there's been a lot of research in this. There's an understanding that we're really going through a major transition demographically. Most people I'm looking around in this room are digital immigrants, okay? Now, when we speak of an immigrant, right, we think maybe in America, right, the old Eastern European Jew, the immigrant, he has a funny accent, like she doesn't really know what's flying, something, a relic of the old country.
Excuse me.
Yes?
No, you made the joke
Yeah.
about the Eastern European Jews.
It's okay. Now we, the Anglos, are the immigrants. It's okay. Now we're in Israel. We can flip it around, right? The funny Anglos who never really learn Hebrew and who think they can get along and hang out in their own little bubbles. I am one of those. We're immigrants, but there's another platform to analyze this. Digital immigrants versus digital natives. Now, it's known in immigrant communities that children seamlessly integrate, and the language of the country is their lingua franca. They've grown up with that. And when you guys speak to high schoolers, college students, millennial age digital natives, you're dealing with a completely different psychological operating system because technology is their lingua franca. They're digital natives, right? It's the substrate that they exist in. For us, it's, oh, a new piece of technology. For them, it's just part and parcel of life. It's like the oxygen they breathe. Or as they say, a fish, fish looks to another fish and says, what's water? They're talking about water. They don't have any concept of water. It's their substrate. So there's been a lot of research on digital natives and empathy. Are digital natives really being trained and developing the same empathetic skills to relate to other human beings as once was? The answer, apparently, the jury's still out. There's a lot of research to be done, but early indicators say no. And this facet of, ducking out of a social situation through the sweet, soothing comfort of your digital device. Oh, where is that? Where is it? Oh. Is an interesting phenomenon to talk about. Okay, let's go into another question here. Show of hands, who thinks technology is making us as a species overall smarter? Smarter. Our cognitive faculties are strengthened by technology. Do you want to share why you think so?
I have this discussion with my children, and I've had, it's interesting. So it's just what I believe, number one. But I think if you took a picture of my children's brains at the age of 13, and a picture of my brain at my age at 13, I bet they would be wired differently than I was, because we didn't know, we didn't have this stuff.
Absolutely. The question's in what ways?
Okay. It makes me, number one, I believe we become all collectively more creative and expressive. And in doing so, I think I think we become more intelligent. And the other thing is I believe that we're all connecting in other ways, be it spiritually or this way. And I think we're finding each other in new ways. It's just elevating us to a different consciousness. It's what I believe. I'm not saying I'm right. It's why I'm rationalizing.
Is anybody else on this side of the spectrum that technology is making us smarter? Yeah, in the corner?
It gives us far greater access to knowledge at our fingertips, and you can use that to build and take to the active.
Absolutely.
But also say, like anything, I like good wine, but if I drank a bottle of wine for breakfast.
Right.
You'd have an awesome day.
Right.
Yeah, you do anything tomorrow morning?
No, yeah. So, like anything, too much.
In moderation. Okay, let's tease out this. This is really interesting for me to hear people's perspectives. We got one right here, and then we'll go here.
Have an opposite perspective. Similar, I agree, but I think there's another side to that as well.
Okay, before we go to the other side, we're going to explore both sides. We're right now on technology is creating more cognitively capable human beings. Yes.
I think that on the other side, one to make the argument on the other side, that some things that because it's so readily available, and you don't figure things out because it's already there. You don't like.
Wait, are you saying it is not making us smarter?
I'm saying maybe not. Maybe it's making us.
Okay, we're still on technology is making us smarter, guys. We're going to talk about attention spans in a little bit when we go to the other side. Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding.
You didn't say that we're talking about only one side of the argument. But
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else for technology is making us smarter? We'll explore the other side. Left. Yes?
Technology became much more accessible. Everything you want to go deeper with your knowledge, it's you just press one button and you receive the whole information. A good example is, for example, you know the game Speed Trivia.
Okay.
It's an app that you can actually play and test yourself in different trivia questions. And if you answer a wrong answer, you can actually Google right away. It goes to Wikipedia and you can learn more about it.
Google right away. Is that an asset or a crutch? We're going to talk about that.
So all the information is just accessible.
I think the key, what you said right there, is access. Now, when you think of research, right? Maybe some people in the room remember this. Not quite me when I was doing my research, but there used to be these things actual called folders and actual called cabinets. Is that true? Can people in the room corroborate this? Right? And you would have to search through academic journals, actual in-paper journals that costed hundreds of dollars. You couldn't just type it in.
It was exciting.
It was exciting, but it did not provide the level of access to information that we have at our fingertips instantaneously now,
But if
anywhere in the world.
If you went to this, if you put so much effort in finding it, you knew it. Not like Google and
Oh, that is going to be interesting. Okay, I want to see if there's any few arguments for technology is making us smarter, and then we're going to go explore the other side. Yeah.
On the contrary, or in some ways, I believe, because it diminishes our ability to concentrate for an extended time.
Okay.
For example, I see that my little brother, it's so difficult for him to sit with a book and just read because he's used to this flicking, all the time, a new message, a new channel, something new all the time.
Okay.
So that way, I don't think it's.
I hear and I agree with you. One more time. If anybody has a reason to say that technology is making us smarter, not the other side. We're going to explore the other side. I feel people are very eager to explore the other side. Wait, somebody who has not spoken yet, spoken. Have you spoken? Please.
Can we say, you're saying smarter. I think there are other benefits to it, like being more connected, being
We're talking about cognitive faculties here.
Okay, right.
Yes, I would argue that, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Please.
Beautiful TED Talk about where they took computers to the middle of rural villages, slums, people who had never had seen a computer, and they left the children with the computer for a day.
Right, I saw this.
And within whatever time period it was, again and again, the kids figured it out. And they made it more and more complicated, and then we got more and more difficult information, and these kids kept figuring it out. And I think that is perfect proof of how we're giving tools that allow people to cognitively figure things out.
Beautiful.
Now, I can argue the other side too.
Beautiful.
We're definitely taking human capacity to the next.
And I want to add, I'm just clicked right now in my mind. How about optimizing education? No longer do we have to settle for a one-size-fits-all model of education. With things like the Khan Academy, we can really go into each individual person and educate them according to their skill and where they're at. That's a scalable piece of individualized technology that was never made possible, and that definitely can increase the human capacity for cognition. So I really appreciate that comment.
Yeah, just to respond to that, I think it's a pretty invalid, ridiculous argument. You're taking a computer to where they have nothing, and you're giving them education. Yes.
No, but that's not what I'm arguing. It's the cognitive skill that they were able to sit on their own, work with the computer, and figure out how to
But
use
if you brought them Legos and puzzles, it could have been the exact same experience, meaning
But Legos
you
and
can't
puzzles
compare
are
zero
technology for
education
them.
to like
What is
amazing
technology?
education.
Okay,
Compare-
that's a good question. This
Anyway,
will only be this will
This
only be settled by a rock paper scissors contest that will be happening after the talk. Okay. Any more for technology? Did you have one, Natalie? Technology is making us smarter.
I did. I think that through technology, because we have access to all this information, we're able to better cross-pollinate the different fields of study we need to help us learn better. When I think about my niece or nephew who is learning with, for example, Dora the Explorer, the way they're watching television is a dramatically different way than I did, and that's because they're taking from different fields like neuroscience, like linguistics, and that is a result of technology and the information access that technology's brought us.
Absolutely. Very good. One last on positive, and then everyone who is waiting to say, there's no way you guys are wrong. Yeah, sure.
I think that the potential for this particular generation to help the future generations is really, when you talk about optimal, we had books, we had library systems, we had file cabinets. The generation after us, not so much, and the generation of children, B'ezrat Hashem, that we will have even less. And so if we, as the people who know how to do these things, and were brought up with the computer age, if we would teach these children to access it, so the generation that we could provide from Torah learning or whatever would the base be, would be incredible. And in terms of your rock, paper, scissors argument, as a teacher, I once had a contest. I had a diplomat, like an important, well-educated man, and his son. And I said, in your father's generation, if you wanted to know an answer, you would have to go and look. In your generation, you could do Google. I have a question. What's the first ingredient in Cheerios Go? I just wanted the father to go to get the box and turn it around and tell me the first ingredient, and I wanted the son to look at Google and see. And neither of them had the skills to do it rather quickly. It was really amusing to me. I was like, no, but Dad, just look at the box and turn it around. You could do it. And son, just like write. And neither of them did it fast. And so we could have a million tools in front of us if we don't know the best way to use and access these things. So we're meaningless Lego pieces trying to plug them into a computer.
Okay. The floor is now open for all those waiting to say, there is no way technology is making us smarter. We are raising a generation of imbeciles. There's no chance. Okay. Calm down. Okay. Yes, you had started.
Felt there were two sides. I felt it was both making us smarter and making us dumber. And one of the examples that came to mind as you were speaking was before the advent of the cell phone, you knew every phone number of every person in your life. Like you wanted to call. I'm saying.
Who here knows the phone number of their significant other, if they have a significant other? Who here doesn't?
No, but no, it is, and I'll tell you why. Because technology has offered us such a crutch that we actually don't have to fundamentally understand things or even process them really, because it's being done for us. So if you're looking at it from a cognitive or like brain processing perspective, I feel like our brain is actually being utilized less than it was before, when we actually had to do some of that processing ourselves.
Good.
Now on the reverse, we do have access to more information and new, like new ways of doing things, etc. And so we're actually getting more information, and in another way becoming more diverse and having more knowledge.
Okay.
But I feel like
Okay.
so it's two sides.
I'm going to do a reverse to that side. You've said that we're relying on technology as a crutch, and we're not calculating these mental processes or internalizing them the way we used to. There were those who'd argue that's great. Now we can outsource all that brain power, freeing us up to do other things that are important. Osha Kane Oshlo. By the way, who here thinks that because of technology they're better spellers? That's a very interesting question. Do our emails go out with less spelling mistakes than letters used to do? Yes. If we are stranded on a desert island, would we have the internal capacity to spell those letters correctly? No. Good. Computers are better. So this boils down to what? Yeah.
This is technology. This is window. People used to open the window and have the fresh air. Now I'm looking at this disgustingly dirty air conditioner, but everyone is using it because this is what people think it gives us a fresh air.
Excuse me, that's Bauhaus aesthetic.
No, but I'm saying I cover myself because it's cold. But I'm just saying many situations we think instead of open the window and get the natural air, we'll put the air conditioner.
Good.
And many things we substitute with technology.
Good.
When we can do still the natural way. It doesn't. It's fantastic that Google exists, and when we need something quick, we can put it. But I feel still that for the purpose of studying, exercising your mind, it's better to do it with books and with the folders. And I think the Orthodox people who study Torah for their whole life, they could Google, right?
Not so much.
No.
No.
Everything is digitalizing, right? But the essence of it, it's not if they will find the answer, it's the essence of looking for an answer.
Right. I think you're hitting on some deep, which from my yeshiva experience, I spent 8 years in yeshiva, and I am convinced that this is true, that in Torah, it's not about right answers, it's about right methodology. And Torah is training you. We see that from the Talmud, which leaves many different answers open. We see there's a methodology, a Talmudic methodology of argument, of engaging of ideas, of diversity, of bringing together proofs and logic. And it's that methodology. Some guy comes up with, this is kosher. Some other guy comes up, this is not kosher. They're both right. It's okay, as long as they follow the correct methodology, which I think is a very deep point in particularly Torah learning, but not, yeah.
Speaking of methodology and clarification, I'm not sure what kind of intelligence you're talking about when you ask this question. I think it's maybe more intelligent as in I have a lot more access to information.
Right.
But I think that I avoid having a hard conversation with my friend by pretending my mother's calling me, and so it makes me less emotionally intelligent.
So we're talking about cognitive intelligence. That's what we're talking. We're going to talk about relationships now. I just want to follow up. Does anybody else have anything to say on cognitive intelligence? Yes, sir.
All right, I would say to sum up what we spoke about, no one said anything specifically positive or negative, but in the end, with cell phones, we have a lot more access to computers and everything. We have a lot more access, but the thing is that a lot of conversations that I have, I'm a very big Googler. And it just kind of kills the conversation immediately. I just tell them this is what the answer is. There's no discussion.
Right.
There's no ability to have a discussion anymore. This is the answer. This is what Google said. That's what I found on Wikipedia. So there's no, I think that kills, it depends how you describe the word intelligence. Like intelligent, like Shira said there was an issue, they couldn't think like maybe I should Google this. While other people maybe Google too much and just don't discuss, here this is what's going on, let's move on to the next conversation.
Right.
People know very little about a lot of different things.
So just on that, I met a woman in England with an amazing best practice. She says when she's having a conversation with somebody in a bar or wherever, it's a college girl and somewhere in England, she said that she has a policy for 2 hours not to Google it. Because there's something called memory, and there's also something called asking somebody. And it's very possible that these two modes of data, these two inputs, could yield results. So she gives herself 2 hours to either try to remember it or ask somebody, or it comes up, and then she Googles it because it's a tool that we should use. One final thing I'll say, and we're going to move on to our relationships, which is a very interesting, nuanced conversation. But if we take cognitive intelligence as a benchmark of attention spans, in the year 2000, they measured the average human attention span on a given day, a given moment, and they found that humans could focus on a particular idea for 12 seconds, 12 whole seconds.
What year was that?
2000. They did that again in 2012, and the number was 8 seconds. The same research report says that a goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. Okay? Now, this is a critical metric when we're talking about methodology, how we measure cognitive intelligence. The ability to focus on an idea is really at the crux of our capacity as humans to think. When we think about deep critical thought, it requires focus, it requires attention. I remember I saw at a yeshiva some sort of sign that, imagine if Einstein, while he was cultivating the general theory of relativity for 20 years, right? If he was getting buzzed every time somebody tagged him on Instagram or on Facebook, or like there's no capacity to think when there's so much static and noise pulling us out of our thought process. So the fact that humans, we look at how the brain is wired in this generation, the capacity to focus has gone down, and that is an objective metric of cognitive intelligence. One, but again, it's a nuanced conversation. Moving on to relationships. Show of hands, just off the cuff. Yes, there's many ways you could ask this question. Who here thinks that humans are more capable of maintaining strong, positive relationships as a result of technology? Show of hands, technology facilitating relationships, 30.5%. And who says definitively no way? Interesting. When I just spoke to a group of 100, 4 different sessions of 100 seminary girls, 18-year-old girls. They definitively, and everywhere I go, I travel, I ask this question, teenagers are unanimous, almost unanimous, that technology is not facilitating positive relationships.
Teenagers think that?
Teenagers think that. There's breakups on Facebook walls. There's cyberbullying. There's ghosting. People who read the New York Times article about ghosting. Ghosting is very juicy. When you're dating somebody and they're social media friends, and then all of a sudden you just disappear.
Oh, like every guy in Israel?
I see that ghosting is more prevalent than initially thought. How about this? You're pouring out your heart to your friend. Oh, you know, you're having a tough situation, and all of a sudden, no, they're going to do it. Oh, that phone comes out, pulling that person completely out of the moment. Or maybe we're on the other end. Maybe for the guys, maybe more relevant than the girls who have phones in their pockets, but you're trying to have a deep conversation with somebody, and you get that little nice, sweet hit of dopamine, zzz, 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 right? That completely pulls you out of the present moment. How are you supposed to empathize with the depth that's being conveyed right now when now all of a sudden the mind's racing? Who is it? Who's it going to be? Wow, I'm important. Look at me. It's very challenging, and teenagers particularly are aware of this challenge. I'll just give you one other piece of research, and then we'll hear from the floor. At the University of Essex in 2012, they did a very fascinating research They took two groups of people. In the sample control group, they paired people off, 2 people at a time, and they put them in a room to go have a conversation. 2 strangers having a conversation. There was just a chair, a table, and on the table was a notebook. Okay? The other group, the variable group, on that same chair table setup, they put an iPhone face down, not on distracting people, but face down. And they measured 3 things. They measured how well the people, how close the person felt with the person they were communicating with. They measured the level of trust they felt, and they measured the conversation quality in subjective terms. How did you feel the depth of that conversation was? And they conclusively found that the control group had much stronger levels of trust, much higher levels of conversation, and a much deeper connection to their partner than the group that just merely had an iPhone. This isn't somebody looking on their iPhone. This is just the subconscious presence of the technology on the table.
But there were different people, different chemistry, how they can actually measure.
They are taking a large sample size of complete strangers, and they're objectively measuring. I felt this went a 7. I felt this went a 9. We talked about something that was as deep, you know, a kid's soccer practice is maybe a 4. A breakup that I just went to is maybe an 8. So subjective measurements, this was their methodology. You can check it out. Researchers at the University of Essex 2012. Anyway, I'm just putting this out there on the table. This is the research. Who here, let's hear for the technology. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for connection and connectivity in technology. This kind of came up in the discussion about cognitive intelligence. Who here strongly feels that technology is making us more capable of maintaining relationships? Somebody who hasn't spoken want to share? Everybody's spoken? Somebody who hasn't spoken, let's see. We got something to share here? All right, Alan, shoot.
I think over the weekend, what happened, what transpired, I mean, there's evil everywhere, but I think a lot of goodness came out. And you know, I really believe you can get the answer. I don't think there's any universal truth to any of this. It's just part of our life. It's how you manage it. It's what you decide. So if you want to be mindful about it, you can. And you can also shut your phone off.
That's a very mindful practice.
Yeah, and talk to a human. But also you can, what she's doing right now for whatever reason, it's okay. It's okay.
I work 80 hours a week. I'm here and I'm in New York. So.
We're everywhere. Okay. I want to hear arguments. I want to hear arguments, and I can make very powerful.
I don't think there's a universal truth.
We're not asking for you. We're asking for different takes of the right. They have the blind men and the elephant. This is amazing, and I feel this is a very depth about Torah truth. I just have to tell this parable. There is an elephant. There are 5 blind wise men. One goes up and feels the tail, and they're trying to have a deep existential conversation of the nature of the elephant. One feels the tail and says, "You know what? This elephant, the nature of the elephant is bristly and it flaps around everyone." And another guy's grabbing the tusk. No. The elephant is smooth and shiny. The other guy's grabbing the foot. No, it's coarse and scaly. They're all right, but what they've done is brought nuanced truth of different parts of this elephant. And I feel very strongly, I'm very connected to this idea that technology, it's amorphous. There's a lot of nuance to it, and this conversation brings out the beautiful potential and optimism of a digital age, as well as some of the dystopia and some of the really challenging, scary negative effects of it. So I would just like to right here, the side of the elephant, that people say technology is, boom, awesome, making relationships fantastic. Who's got a case study, an experience? Yes?
Okay, so for example, my best friend from middle school.
Good.
So I I really love her and adore her still to this day, but you know, she lives in Germany right now, so I don't really have a connection with her. I'm not really thinking about her on a day-to-day basis. But then she'll pop up on my newsfeed, and I'll like remember how much I love Jane, how cool she is, and all our adventures, and, you know, and troubles that we get ourselves into.
Totally.
And so I'm thinking about her in a positive sense, and you know, reminiscing about our relationship, and also, you know, seeing people online on Facebook. You know, even though I'm not interacting with them, I still feel like that's part of our relationship.
I absolutely agree with you. I'm a big fan of Facebook. I wrote an article called Why I Love Facebook, a Spiritual Perspective, or Kabbalist Perspective, but these certain nuances, right? Everybody knows, yes, a Facebook feed wall, it's not substituting an in-person relationship. But you know what? It's buttressing that. I'm somebody who's lived in 4 countries, and I have many different social networks of friends, and I love the fact that I can stay in touch peripherally with their lives, and they can mine. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah? In the back?
First of all, I don't think something is black or white. So I'm not like saying something is like this or like that. I'm definitely Facebook dependent. I cannot say no, but and on one hand, I'm very happy I'm in touch with my friends from all over the world and with people who I haven't seen for a long time, and it gives illusion. It gives illusion in many cases that we're like so close. And on one hand, it's very nice to be in touch with friends. And I also experienced that friends who are not on Facebook, it's much harder to be in touch because we have to write like a long email or call instead of write a short message each day.
Good.
But on the other hand, it gives also an illusion for people who we barely know, but we connected on Facebook.
Cool.
And for example, today, while working, but I also spent a day discussing about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with someone who I know. He's not my very good friend, but I know him. He reacted to my posts. I felt obliged to react to him. The discussion is basically pointless.
Okay.
And
okay.
we spent a whole day, but I feel obliged because he's
right.
Like, I must say, because of the situation, I had to exclude some people, unfriend on Facebook.
Right. Okay, there's a lot of Facebook politics. I just want to maybe hear just a few more before.
I want to say that on one hand, yes, it's helping. On the other hand, I feel obliged because I know the person, but basically I think, like, why am I wasting my time on someone who I barely know?
Another, somebody who hasn't spoken yet. Yes.
So I think a little bit different. I think that the people, that the technology today make the people that's far from you closer, but the people that near around you far.
Wow. That was one of the most intelligent things I've heard in the past year. Thank you. That's a deep insight I'm going to reflect on. Thank you very much. Yeah, I have a lot, not phrasing those words, but you know, I FaceTime my parents. I've got 2 little kids. It's bath time in Israel. In Tucson, Arizona, 10 hours away, 10,000 miles. And we can instantaneously bridge that gap, right? That's a yichud. That's a bringing together of time and space, right? It's collapsed. And I try to think what that would have been 100 years ago, right? To hire an artist, and artist paints a rendition of bath time, send it by donkey to the port, you know, gets on a ship, ends up in Spain, another ship to America, covered wagon to Arizona. Is it ever going to get there? That's the distance that we've bridged. But as you said, we can all picture ourselves sitting at the dinner table or at a lunch table or out at a restaurant, and 4 people sitting around there, and we can't even bridge 2 feet between us, right? Very interesting. Okay, let's hear. Technology is not improving relationships, and we're going to move forward out of this section of the talk.
I think it makes us too available. There's no, you're constantly obsessing, anxiety. I don't know, like the anxiety nation has come across our youth because you're always anxious for the next. Why your friends aren't texting you, why he's not talking to you, always thinking about the what ifs, and everyone's so available to do that, and people are just kind of
It's an expectation, right? People talk in work life, right? Did it ever exist that you had to sit at 11 p.m. in bed with your spouse? Did it ever exist? And then you're expected, right? The markets are open in Tokyo, and if you don't get on that contract, that's what people are dealing with.
No, but you used to speak on a telephone for 2 hours with a friend, but at that time you would speak only to this friend, and now you can chat to many people at the same time, which kind of takes away the quality.
Okay, okay. But we're talking about the constant availability here. I think that is one facet. Very nice. Anybody else have something to share? Shira.
As people who are more observant, I think that we can see the balance, and I think in this age, Shabbos becomes even more important because without Shabbos, many of us wouldn't put down that or take the time to have those conversations. So I think in the same way that the world was created with this sort of putting in and then taking away, the idea that we can use technology to teach the concept of using and taking away is something that is again, our generation has the potential to do unbelievable creation. And when you talk about the absence of distance and time and space, I mean, that's from the days of Frankenstein. Man has always just wanted to create. And now we're able to create, as relationships that exist only in time and space. And so it's just a question of us looking, I guess, at the Torah to see the model of what does that mean to not be restrained by time and space the way that Hashem is not restrained. So also at this point we aren't, and if we use it correctly, or if we use it to strengthen our relationships and to build those, so we can be unbelievable creators of information and relationships.
Okay. Thank you, and I appreciate everyone should give each other a round of applause. This is nice, heated. Okay, listen, I have to say, I'm going to reiterate again, it's a complex subject. I'm not against technology. I'm not a Luddite, right? This is a reference. In England during the Industrial Revolution, people went around smashing machines. That is not my understanding of what the Torah expects of me, being a religious Jew, and not my understanding just in general of a practical, pragmatic life approach. I've actually formed 2 tech companies. One is the Israel app. It's a free app up on the App Store, built-in app. Believe in apps, it's a good thing. My second company, Wisdom Tribe, is also using technology, using social media to spread ideas from ancient Jewish wisdom out to a global universal audience. So I'm a big believer in technology, but I'm also a big believer in experience. And I think this is a very interesting way to approach this, that there's digital education. We talked about the way we can access knowledge through scalable digital technologies and even optimized to certain people and where they are in their skills. And that's great, and there's so much information coming in, but I do believe that we should balance that out with an understanding of experiential education. Right? Experiential education would be like, going and being an apprentice somewhere, getting the feel for it, right? Being immersed in an experience, not just looking at a screen or trying to consume text rapidly, right? So, I'll share with you, back 10 years ago, I formed a music festival. Okay, it's still going, it's 10 years running in Santa Barbara called Chila Vista. Okay, an interactive celebration of community. It was awesome. One stage was run on solar, one stage was run on biodiesel. 100 students got credit for this music festival. It was done through the university. Eventually, the university institutionalized it. We had a community currency called Chila Skrilla. We had an organic farmer's market. It was awesome. So I really got my taste for experiential education in forming that music festival. And I want to tell you about my best friend who I formed that festival with, a guy named Levi Felix. Okay? My buddy Levi and I were called into the chancellor's office after we threw this festival, and the chancellor said, you know what? Santa Barbara doesn't always get the best press. If anybody knows American universities, UC Santa Barbara is like the top party school. You can walk in with your wetsuit and your surfboard into class. That's a common occurrence. We did this festival, got great press, and he said, listen, you guys can have full-time jobs to do this. Now, I wasn't able to take the job. I was going out to London to do a master's there, and my buddy Levi had gotten a job first working for the Moshe House. People know Moshe House, also came out of Santa Barbara at the time. Then he ended up working for a tech company called Causecast in Santa Monica. Okay, I visited my buddy Levi, 23 years old. He was the vice president of a tech company, managing a room of about 45 programmers and producers, editors. It was a big operation. And what they were doing is networking with celebrities in LA and getting them to promote causes on a social network. Fine. One day, Levi was at the South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas, and he was walking through the hallways, and lo and behold, he collapsed on the floor. As a 23-year-old kid, he was hospitalized in Austin, and he ruptured some sort of internal organ, and the doctor said, dude, you're killing yourself. You're working too hard. You've stressed yourself out where your body's like bursting at the seams. He says, I recommend you take a vacation. My buddy Levi's a smart guy. He got his employer to pay him $2,000 a month to travel the world on sabbatical blogging about his experience, okay? He was in Israel for a little bit, but eventually he settled on a small island off of Cambodia, okay? With zero technology. He went from being VP of a tech company in Santa Monica to no tech, right? Spearfishing in the coral reefs all day, hanging out, doing yoga, meditating. To shoot an email out, he'd have to take a boat to the mainland, walk to the chai shop, and email, and then he'd go back to his no-tech refuge. Levi Felix. Levi shows up back in the Bay, in San Francisco in 2010, right after the iPhone was born. And he looked around, it was like a twilight zone. He saw a completely different humanity than before he'd left, right? Everybody is staring into their screens. People are walking and texting and talking and flicking their fingers all over the place. He couldn't figure out what was going on. But he's a smart guy, and he founded a company called the Digital Detox. Started out with about 15 people at a time, taken out for a retreat from Friday to Sunday. People pay $750 a pop. And they experience, right, he confiscates all technology at the door. 3 rules at the Digital Detox camp. You can't use your real name. You have to have a camp name to prevent networking and whoever's going to show up there. A lot of people from the valley were coming to this. You can't talk about work. You can't talk about you can't use your real name, and no technology. He allows like film cameras, but no digital cameras. The Digital Detox started picking up speed. This thing started getting hot. I remember he did an event in San Francisco called Device-Free Drinks. Okay, in the picture of the New York Times article that covered it, you had this huge burlap wall with little cubbies, and people came. It was sold out, 300 people, and all the smartphones are like lined up on the wall. And no more retreating into your phone in an awkward social circumstance, guys. This is real face-to-face, mano-y-mano communication, right? So Levi's brand started picking up big. He founded a camp called Camp Grounded. Okay, if people have heard of Camp Grounded? Alan he just did one in Austin, Texas, in New York, in San Francisco. What does he do? A summer camp for adults. 300 people at a time. They come from Friday to Sunday. No technology. Bring your camp name. Levi's camp name is Fidget Bigglesworth. Mine is Professor Goji Berry. It's a lot of fun. And this thing started picking up. The New Yorker did a 6-page spread on him. Levi's been in Forbes and Business Week, all the major media outlets. Digital Detox is huge, and Camp Grounded is huge, and it's really ushering in a new mode of business, a new mode of life practice. The word mindfulness does not encompass that. We're going to talk about the definition of mindfulness, but I want to, before we go into this part of the talk, say that something is changing. We're entering a new epoch. We really are. Of social innovation, of ethical business practice, of entrepreneurship we see, and people seeking meaning, people seeking a work-life balance, and people wanting to make their day jobs meaningful, okay? The most encompassing word, perhaps, I found for this is the mindfulness movement. Show of hands, who was familiar with that word mindfulness, and not just from this Facebook flyer on, okay? So mindfulness. Mindfulness was, at least in its contemporary conception, founded by a guy named Jon Kabat-Zinn, a Jewish guy raised in New York, went to MIT and founded something called mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is a clinical approach at kind of stilling your mind into the present moment. The thesis is that so many times we're being distracted, we're being pulled away, and we just need to collect all that energy and be present. Or as Baba Ram Das put it, be here now. That's one school. Also, the second school came up, which was a much more Buddhist emphasis, was founded by Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, and Joseph Goldstein, who are also 3 Jews living in Boston. So this is the origins of the mindfulness movement. And really, again, the word itself is much too small to contain all the changes that we're seeing right now in 2015. But a few facets of the mindfulness movement. Mindfulness is big. The world's biggest companies, not just in the tech world like Twitters, the Googles, the Facebooks, but more traditional companies. Bill Ford, the CEO of Ford Motors, has worked for the past 2 years to bring mindfulness into Ford and scalable to their entire company, as well as Starbucks is doing that. General Mills is practicing. Target, Aetna Insurance did a mindfulness program, basically training their employees in stilling the mind, developing a level of emotional intelligence, awareness of what's happening in our emotions. And their internal survey found, which they published, they found that they saved $2,000 per employee that went through the program because employees were more focused. Right? There's been incredible academic research that shows that this mindfulness practice increases the gray matter of our brain. You're able to stay on task. It increases executive function in the neocortex, so leaders can make more effective decisions in points of stress. That's why the US military as well, the Marines are experimenting with mindfulness. They found that mindfulness enhances both soldiers' performance in the field under high stress situations, but maybe even more importantly is mitigating the alarming rates of suicide. You know, it's a huge thing. You know, veterans are killing themselves. They're in deep states of depression, and mindfulness has been clinically shown to mitigate that depression. Mindfulness is in sports, right? Phil Jackson, who was the coach of the Bulls and then the Lakers, was an early adopter of Zen and mindfulness, but more recently the Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl champs, the mindfulness program. It's something that's happening very big, and again, the word itself and its meaning of restoring your mind to the present moment is not fully enough to capture what this is. There's a component of mindfulness also called emotional intelligence. Right? This came up when we were talking about cognitive intelligence. Just want to ask throughout to the crowd, I want you to think of a leader, somebody that's been in your life, that's been demonstrating solid leadership traits, somebody that you would follow, someone you look up to. Can people share, like, what is that person? What represents that person? A few traits.
Jay Schultz.
Jay Schultz. What is not who? Not who. What are the traits of a leader? Come on, let's hear a few. Popcorn, quick. Charismatic, smart, inspiring, strong, humble, reliable, able to execute, listening. If you look aside from the word smart, if you look at all of those traits, those are not cognitive traits. Smart is. Meaning, people very rarely say, this guy's a leader because he can crunch math problems really quickly. No, she's a leader. Why? Because she's a listener, because she's humble, because she can follow through, because she's sensitive to what's around her. She can catalyze a group of people. These are emotional traits. And there's been incredible literature recently about the power of emotional intelligence. You know, even in companies where like Google hires the smartest people. But smart people, just like on a basketball team, talented basketball players are nothing on their own. It's the same with emotional intelligence. There are a bunch of smart people in the room who aren't sensitive to listening, to compassion, to where they're overstepping their boundaries. Doesn't do anything. And people don't leave jobs. People leave bad managers. Managers who don't have the emotional intelligence to manage and guide an organization. So I just got back from a seminar Google gives called Search Inside Yourself, right? It's a play on Google search, right? So instead of searching the web, you search inside yourself. And they do a 2-day emotional intelligence training. I was in Manhattan last week. It was $1,250 to attend. It's an expensive seminar, attended by about 100 people. And excitingly, Wisdom Tribe will be producing and hosting Google Search Inside Yourself seminar here in Tel Aviv for the first time, May 19th and 20th. More on that to come.
Are we all invited?
You guys are all invited for 3,807. Okay, we'll talk about discount codes for hashtag White City Shabbat, right? So emotional intelligence is part of this mindfulness movement. Maybe one other way to characterize this I can give you guys from my experience. I'm really into social movements. Like I was born in 1985 and I was raised in the 90s, and I always felt like I should be raised in the 60s. I was a big chassid, right? A big adherent of Abby Hoffman, Allen Ginsberg, right? Bob Dylan. I felt there was a huge wave of social consciousness. You look at the 1960s, it was an era of incredible social change, incredible meaning, incredible optimism. People were purpose-driven. But it didn't really have a footing, and as we know, the 1960s burned out. If you want proof, just go to Haight-Ashbury today, San Francisco, where they say the genesis of the hippie movement. It's a bit burned out, unfortunately. I want to contrast the epoch, the decade of the 1960s with the 1980s. The 1980s, again, these are sweeping generalizations, but they do mean something. The 80s was an era of Reaganomics, of Margaret Thatcherism. It was mergers and acquisitions. Not a very socially, passionately inspired time, a time of hardcore business values and principles and generating lots of profit. The 80s, right? What I believe you're seeing today is a hybrid of those two. From a Kabbalistic perspective, you have a dichotomy in the world of light and vessel. What does that mean? This cup right here is a vessel. It's very good at transporting whatever I want to transport. If I want to give you some water and I just throw water at you, there's just a bunch of water everywhere. There's no relationship. What a cup does, it enables a relationship to be formed. So I believe, and this is the way I conceive of it, the 1960s was an incredible degree of light. Light is water. Light is the inner essence of what we're trying to get at. What are we purpose-driven? What are we motivated by? Are we inspired? That was the era of the 1960s. 1980s, all that water was gone. And we built very, very strong vessels. We built big companies. We built conglomerates. We built multinationals. But it was an era not of the most ethically conscious, business. We could think about the rivers, lighting on fire in Cleveland, and a lot of the practices in the 1980s. For me, the 1960s were a time of light, without vessel. That's why the 1960s didn't stick. They didn't have a strong foundation. They didn't have the Kalium. They didn't have the structure. 1980s was a lot of structure, but not a lot of inspiration. If you look at today, the world's biggest companies, we've cracked business, right? We have incredible tools. We have incredible management principles. The vessel of business and of startups is, and particularly here in Tel Aviv, is pulsing, is lively. But so is the purpose. Purpose-driven business, social entrepreneurship, social innovation. It's business that people are serious. They're not flaky. They're not they're real serious people with serious skills. But they're motivated by something more than the bottom line, the financial bottom line. Right? A lot of progressive economists talk about the triple bottom line, also taking into account not just financial, but social and ecological externalities. So one other way to conceive of this, again, mindfulness being the inappropriate word to describe something much larger, is we're coming to an era that's a bit of the inspiration of the 1960s inside the vessel of hardcore business management and structure, 1980s. Okay. So what does any of this have to do with Judaism? I'm sure that was on all your guys' mind. No. Being somebody who's a religious Jew, I'm constantly looking for sparks that are in the world, for areas of connection. And when I heard about the mindfulness movement, when I heard that there's a gathering in Silicon Valley which draws together the world's top mindfulness teachers, meditation teachers, neuroscientists studying emotional intelligence, and puts them together with the CEO of LinkedIn, with the CEO of Facebook, with CEO of Zappos, I'm very excited. That's an exciting gathering. And the name of that gathering is called Wisdom 2.0. And I heard about it from my buddy Levi. Levi actually was a speaker at Wisdom 2.0. 2,500 people at this conference paying $1,000 a ticket in San Francisco. And I decided, that's it, I'm going to Wisdom 2.0. I have to do this. It was about 2 years ago. So I went on Shabbat. It was a Shabbat conference. So I came on Shabbat. I dressed in a full Hasidic garb, black top hat, my payas no longer tucked, but hanging down, let it all hang loose on Shabbat. Get into that. And I showed up in a full Hasidic garb in San Francisco Friday afternoon in 2014. I was very intimidated. I'd spent 8 years in yeshiva. I wasn't in the tech world. This was kind of over my element. And I took a seat in the very, very back. And the founder of the conference, Soren Gordhammer, gets up and he says, this conference is growing each year, more and more people. We've got some of the biggest names in business and technology, in research and mindfulness here. He says, let's just take a look at some of the people in the room. He goes, we've got Yaakov Lehman. And before I know it, here's my face plastered on the giant, double Jumbotron screens in the Marriott Hotel. And they've got a Google map there. Yaakov traveled 7,800 miles to come to Wisdom 2.0 because he says he wants to spend time with good people. That was the quote I wrote when I filled out the ticket form, 6 months earlier. He says, good people. He said, I think we can all appreciate that. And the whole audience busts into a round of applause. And I'm just not expecting it. But at the same time, I wasn't expecting it, but I was ready. We did an event there called Wisdom Shabbos. We had a yoga studio rented out called Zazen. They do flotation tanks and yoga. We had a sushi catered meal, kosher sustainable sushi from my buddy who's got an outlet called L'Chaim Sushi in the Bay. And we had Wisdom Shabbos. Some very interesting people showed up. The head consultant who greened Walmart. Walmart went through a whole greening process, showed up there. One of the third largest digital design agencies in Australia, Bianca Rothschild, showed up there. We did it again this year. The CEO of Mindful Investor showed up. The head of Burning Man's global ambassador was also there, a friend of mine, Bear Kittai. It's a really, really, really fun experience. I did it in Singapore this past summer. And the truth is, I just come back, I said, from America. I started my trip in Hawaii. And I was invited to an invite-only retreat of 45 leaders of this mindfulness movement, including the head of leadership at Facebook, Bill McLaughlin, Melissa Daimler, the head of learning at Twitter, the head of people development at LinkedIn, Kelly Palmer, major VCs from Hong Kong. It was a very interesting group of people. It was a retreat in Hawaii, and it was an unconference. The concept was just bring a bunch of powerful people and let them figure out what to do. You have to pay $3,000 as well, but so I showed up there again in my garb, and I wrote on a little sticky note, Shabbat, one word. Right? You can see it. I've got a picture. I'm not going to show it, but next to another person wrote, "Seeding the next myth and narrative to the populace." Like, this was a woman. What was her? She was CEO of Warcraft for 8 years. And she just founded a company called Transformative Technology, which looks at technology design and how we can design technologies to make us more mindful, to make us more compassionate, as opposed to just throwing out our attention span. She's actually coming out to a conference we'll be throwing in February, which I'll get into a little bit. But Shabbat. So around my Shabbat Eve, I had 8 people come to my breakout session. It was about 5 to 8 people in each group. And I spoke about Shabbat and its connection to mindfulness. I prefaced my talk by saying that Judaism is the most incredibly non-mindful religion out there. Yes, full of neuroses, full of going out. But you know what? I said there's never been a monastic ideal in Judaism. If you look at a lot of the wisdom that mindfulness is drawn from, there's a monastic ideal of disassociating yourself from pleasure, right? Anything you're attached to, according to the Buddhist scriptures, is something that will bring you suffering, including your parents very often. So people in a monastery, you have to disassociate yourself from your passion, from things you love, including food, including sex. I said Judaism is not that. 6 days a week, what does our wisdom tell us? Go build the world. Go make money. Go own the stock market. Go build a startup. Go be a ballerina. Go improve your jump shot. Do whatever you got to do. Yeah, listen, a guy's got to improve his jump shot. You know what I'm saying? 6 days a week. Do not be in a state of just pleasant bliss moment. There has never been a monastic ideal in Judaism. 6 days a week, hustle, build, make, do, get the cash, get the money, get the jump shot, whatever you got to do. But 1 day a week, the idea is to not build, to not create, to not be the boss of your world, but to incubate a state of gratitude, of deep appreciation for what we have. This is, for those who understand the feminine idea, when we say likras kala, we say l'chado di likras kala, come, welcome the Shabbos bride. Why is it called the bride? Because this Shabbat, which is what everything is about, sof ma'aseh machshavati chila, the last thing Hashem created, but is first in thought, is all about completely being in the now. And what I explained to these executives sitting around my Shabbat breakout was that on Shabbat, there's no networking, there's no building, there's no doing business, there's no technology. There's nothing to bring you outside of the present moment. All there is just a deep, warming gratitude and appreciation for what we have. This is the wisdom of Shabbat. And then we go into the week and we build, we create, we get that egotistical, I will say as well, masculine type energy. But we come back every week. It's the axis of our consciousness back to Shabbat. So I shared with them, I was on Shabbat in Hawaii, and I shared with them this is a Jewish wisdom practice, and I got some really, really incredible feedback from the crowd, and it was really a big pleasure to share with them. So I want to give you with that idea. There's another concept I have, and then maybe we'll take a few questions and stop. But there's a line that I formulated that where mindfulness stops is where avodat Hashem, where the Jewish wisdom understanding of how we're meant to act in the world begins. mindfulness and stilling your mind, we don't have time tonight to do practice. You know, I'm a Tai Chi, Qigong teacher, so in a different format, if we're outside, maybe we'll go up to the roof for an after session, and we'll do a little bit of mindfulness to bring our present in the moment. Yeah, the after party. But listen, it's amazing. And if you've read, any of you read Eckhart Tolle or John Kabat-Zinn, restore the mind to the present, restore the mind to the present. But now what? What do we do now? For me, mindfulness is clearing the cache of our cognitive computer. You ever like have a bunch of windows open on your computer, you're running a bunch of programs and it's just slow, it's occupying a lot of RAM, it's just bulky. Mindfulness says, you know what? Move all that static away, clear out some space for your mind to operate. But the question begs, and then what? What do you do once you're there, once you're present? And I believe this is the operating system upon which Jewish consciousness says, because Jewish consciousness is a model of elevating the physical world, from going and taking the caloric energy latent in a delicious baraka, oh yeah, making a blessing, eating the baraka, and then turning that into a mitzvah, schlepping somebody's refrigerator up some stairs. You've now turned margarine, dough, and some sort of weird potato mush into a mitzvah of helping schlep a refrigerator, which is an awesome mitzvah, by the way. Should always look for opportunities to help people, not in their spiritual or emotional things, but physical stuff. Schlepping, driving to the airport. These are the best mitzvahs, guys. So the operating system that we should do that upon, that we should go into the brak and eat, we shouldn't do it because we're hungry and because we're being driven from our lusts, and we shouldn't be driven after our fears. That's what mindfulness does. It makes us rise above the emotions that are constantly driving us. I'm afraid, I'm angry, I'm anxious, or I'm hungry, or I want that, or Mindfulness brings us up to a higher level of consciousness, which is the clear operating system upon that, then which can go back into the physical world, back into meat and wine and sex and all the good things, and doing it to bring it up to a higher purpose. So I often tell people there that our yoga mat in Judaism is our Shabbat table. That is our contemplative practice, and it's done over good food, good wine, and good friends. And so this is the beginning of a conversation. Very exciting. Wisdom Tribe will be partnering with Wisdom 2.0, this main conference, which happens in San Francisco. They've done an event in Dublin, Ireland, which I was at, as well as in Singapore. And now their next international event is going to be Tel Aviv, guys, February 4th. Woo! The title is Wisdom Tribe, Building a More Mindful, Creative, and Compassionate Workplace. We've got Bill Lawton, the head of leadership development at Facebook, coming out. We've got Bill Duane, the head of the superintendent of well-being and high performance at Google, coming out. We've got Nicole Bradford, the former head of Warcraft, coming. We've got researchers from Harvard. We've got researchers from Stanford University. We've got some of the best people in the Israeli business and the Israeli research community. There'll be 4 tracks. One track is going to be wellness, which is a large category. The other track, science. On our steering committee is the head researcher at the IDC Center for Brain and Mind, Dr. Nava Ben Nun. We'll have a business track. The head of the Tel Aviv University Executive Business Education Program, Ora Setter, will be leading the business track. And then we will have a track on technology. And Nicole Bradford will be speaking about that, as well as Bill Duane from Google, who was a manager of Gmail for 8 years, global production manager of the entire Gmail project, the lead engineer, before he left to switch into HR and become the superintendent of well-being and high performance. So it's going to be a very exciting conference. It'll be about 300 people. Hopefully, we do have a flyer here, Yurian. Do have a flyer. We can send out some more information through White City Shabbat when it comes around. Also, the Google Search Inside Yourself seminar we'll be producing in May. So stay tuned. The Mindfulness Movement, hashtag Mindful Middle East, right? We could all use a little bit of mindfulness and compassion in these eras. So we'll start here, healing the rifts in Israeli community, in Israeli society, and hopefully expanding out to a wider audience. My last blessing and idea for you guys is that we should conceive of technology the way we conceive of this water and the cup, which is also, somebody driving a car and the car itself. That we should always be in control of the technology. We should always know what our inner purpose, when we pick up our phone and swipe it to unlock it, what are we there to do? We've allocated ourselves 5 minutes to check email? Great. 5 minutes to scroll Facebook? 20 minutes to scroll Facebook? Great. That's awesome. We should use technology to fulfill our inner intention and goal. The problem is when the cup or the car starts to take over and then the driver starts to doze off, and the car will. This is the nature of Kalium, of vessels, that without proper direction, they will start steering into their own directions. And that's where we get the, who here, you check your email, put your phone in your pocket, and 2 minutes later, you're scrolling again to check your email. What is that? Was that a conscious decision, or is that a habit born about by an addictive technology? So I bless everyone that they should be in control of the technology of their lives and not the technology in control of their lives. Thank you very much.
Amen.